What is up, Pitt fans? Welcome to another edition of the PG Pitt Show, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm Stephen Thompson. That's Abby Schnable. We both cover Pitt athletics for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And Abby, not as much hype around this week as there was last week when you have a backyard brawl, Notre Dame and College game day visiting town, but nonetheless a really huge week in Pitt athletics. We're going to focus mainly on football in this episode. We'll tease a little basketball at the end. But Abby, as the head coach talked about last week, and as we've been talking about kind of all along, this is where it gets really serious. And if Pitt wasn't going to beat Notre Dame last year, they better hope that they can take down Georgia Tech this weekend in Atlanta.
Yeah, don't love that Pat wasn't as excited, not excited, but didn't think that much of the Notre Dame game. But it does come down to these two games. Pitt's best path always has been, since the two losses earlier in the season, their best path to the college football playoff has been through the ACC, which it's a hard one with having to go to Georgia Tech and then having Miami come up home. But with both teams, not playing their best football right now, it's looking up for Pitt, especially because these guys are looking to bounce back after that loss. I know the defensive line in specific is really looking forward to hoping to shut down this Georgia Tech run-heavy offense. And it's going to be an interesting one because I really do think it could go either way.
Yeah, the betting lines, according to our friends at FanDuel, only 2.5 points, factor in home field advantage for Georgia Tech, going to be a sellout. They just announced today. It seems like most people think that these two teams are pretty evenly matched and that this one will go down to the wire. So I think it should be a great game as well. I think a good matchup for Pitt, but we've got to talk a little bit of injuries. We've been doing this all season. But I really want to talk about one guy in particular, and that's Desmond Reid. Obviously a really explosive playmaker, but as I wrote this week, and apologize as I pull up some stats, he really has not made as much of an impact on this season as anyone really had hoped. Even when he has been on the field, he just hasn't been able to play and make an impact as much as, like I said, anyone would have hoped. So he's on pace to really only play about 300 snaps, and that's assuming, a little bit over 300 total snaps this year. And that's assuming that he gets through these final two games without issue, which is seriously in doubt given what we saw in, I believe, the third quarter of the Notre Dame game, him going down, getting rolled up on after being tackled, and just the way that he walked off the field, the way that his leg bent underneath his body, the amount of pain that he seemed to be in seemed pretty severe. So I'm not really counting on him closing the season out. But he's only played in 7 games so far. That's a far cry from the 11 that he played last year. He's not going to hit that mark. But then even when he's on the field, he's averaging about 23 fewer snaps per game as opposed to last year. He's taking 4 fewer carries, averaging close to 50 fewer yards rushing. He's not getting targeted as much in the passing game, almost half as much in the passing game. He's not catching as many of those passes, and he's only averaging 45 receiving yards per game. He hasn't scored a touchdown since the end in a month. I believe it'll be a month by the time they kick off in Atlanta on Saturday afternoon. So really, I guess my question to you at this point, to kind of move this conversation along, just how much of a loss is Desmond Reid if it turns out we see that injury report tonight or later in the week and he's not able to go? Because quite honestly, you have a freshman running back who's making a big impact in Boosie Turner, while Des Reid has not been in the lineup really at all, and he's been more limited than he's been able to be kind of let loose.
Yeah, if you would have asked me this at the beginning of the season, I would have been like, absolutely, this is rough for Pitt. I don't know how they're going to get rushing yards, but I don't think that's the case anymore. Unfortunately, other than a few explosive plays through the stretch, I don't think he's been the X factor on this team, which I think there's a case to say that Boosie Turner, has been the best running back on this team. I mean, I think back to what he did against Florida State, and how he's continued to, progress. And if Desmond Reid's out, I don't think that is the end all be all for this Panthers squad, especially with how pass heavy Mason Heintchel has been. I still would love to see Desmond Reid because he does sometimes add a spark. It's just not the consistent one we saw last year. And so if we're going to lean on a running back, I'd rather it be Boosie Turner because he's been a little bit more consistent. And, he's still a guy that has a lot to prove. Desmond Reid sure is probably going to go try and get to the draft. But at this point, Boosie Turner's playing for his career, still has so much time left in his career. Get him the reps, let him continue to be strong so he can be the guy, be this explosive player that we see out of Desmond Reid for Pitt for the next few years. And, it's a little unfortunate because Desmond Reid is a phenomenal player. It's just with the lack of shock value, I want to say, because last year defenses didn't really totally know much about him. They know a lot about him now. He's undersized. It makes him a little bit easier to defend. And I think Boosie Turner has a lot of that explosivity and is a little bit more physical than Des, which I right now, if I had to pick, I want Boosie Turner as the starter on Saturday, even if Desmond Reid is healthy, just because, that's where the numbers are right now. And I think Boosie Turner can get through some guys, especially with this Georgia Tech defense.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, if Desmond Reid is healthy, he's got to be your starter. I think that's kind of how it's got to go. The thing is, I just don't have any faith in Des to stay healthy. I mean, I think there's a reason why Turner has kind of already surpassed him. It's been a while since, Des was the team's leading rusher. It's really been kind of the Jakiri and Turner show. So, yeah, it just, Pitt, I think, has done everything in its power to keep Des as fresh as possible. He didn't practice all that much in the spring, didn't practice all that much in training camp. He was limited. They severely or cut back on his snaps through the first 2 games of the season compared to 2024. They took him off the special teams eventually. He's missed at least 3 games. If you include that West Virginia game, he's been limited in at least 2 more. So it's just become abundantly clear that Pitt just cannot count on him, really. And so I think that's going to lead you to Jakiri Turner being your de facto starter. But, like I said, I would love to have Des Reid out there as a full-time starter, but he's just not out there enough. And so really when you take a look at that injury report on, whenever it comes out, Thursday night or Friday night or even Saturday, that Des isn't going to play like I would probably expect at this point in the week, I'm not going to consider it a huge loss anymore, right? Like it's just not, he hasn't made enough of an impact this season for me to say, oh man, like missing Desmond Reid in this game is going to be huge. I mean, it's just not an injury that you can factor in to game planning or anything like that. I mean, it's just kind of been how this season has gone. It doesn't say anything about, Des the person or his ability. Like he's still a really good player. And, I think it speaks to his toughness and his character that his belief in the team that he wanted to play so often despite dealing with all these injuries. But at the same time, toughness only goes so far when you have as many injuries as Reid does. I want to touch on one quick other injury thing. So we're kind of monitoring Jeff Percy and also Ryan Coretta as well. Seemed like 2 kind of major offensive line injuries. One of them new, the Coretta thing new. Seems like Isaiah Montgomery would slide in there. Jeremy Darvo, the offensive line coach, was pretty optimistic about what Montgomery put on tape at the end of that Notre Dame game. But then you've also got Jeff Percy and Kendall Stanley kind of floating in a bit of limbo in that left tackle spot. I mean, just what are you expecting out of particularly the left tackle spot this weekend down in Atlanta, Abby?
Yeah, I still think Kendall Stanley's probably going to play a majority of the reps, but I do think they're really going to try and get Percy in there as much as possible, especially with the potential of Coretta being out. Darvo mentioned the possibility of putting Kendall Stanley at the guard spot, which, as we talked about many, many moons ago, don't know how I feel about that with his Stanley just doesn't have a lot of experience in that spot. But, you play your best 5 usually, and I'm not sure Isaiah Montgomery is up there. I do think he played decently well this past weekend, given, what he had to deal with, especially against Jeremiah Love and that Notre Dame offense. But I think the offensive line has been able to handle a lot of curveballs thrown at them, whether it's been injuries, whether it's been tough rushing teams. And while I would like to see Coretta out there, if he's not out there, I think I would right now like Isaiah Montgomery in that spot, especially because I don't necessarily think that Percy is full game ready. And I'd rather have 5 guys out there who can play a whole game, who can give it their all. And I'm not saying that Percy can't. He just has been taking limited reps since getting back from injury. He hasn't played a full game since since before the Boston College game at the beginning of October. And sometimes there's fatigue there. Sometimes there's lapses in your mental game there. And so I'd rather have 5 guys who can play a full game, who can keep it on, and sub in Percy every now and then too, to provide some of that blocking, especially because of how strong he is with his opening up doors on the rushing game and all of that. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a rotation out there, but I do think that this is a strong enough offensive line that they could hopefully hold down the fort against this Georgia Tech team.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would rather have a guy who can play the entire game out there. I wasn't a huge fan of rotating Percy in and out. I think I understand some of the logic behind it. Wanted to get him back into game shape, but at the end of the day, these are big games, and you can't be treating these as rehab starts for anything. Or anything like that. I think you need guys who are going to be in there the full time. So, if Percy's ready to go, would love that. But if not, I think you got to try to ride with Kendall Stanley. And as we'll get into, momentarily here, I mean, it's not a super intimidating Georgia Tech pass rush or front seven or defense as a whole, to be quite honest. So this might be a game where you're able to get away with Isaiah Montgomery or a Kendall Stanley or something like that, maybe playing out of position. To that end, Abby, let's talk a little bit more about Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets, first in the country and obviously first in the ACC in total offense. I believe they're third in the ACC in scoring offense, top 20 nationally. But man, that defense a little rough. They do not create a lot of havoc. They do not create pressure in the backfield. They give up a ton of yards. I believe they are on the bottom. They are 10th in the ACC in scoring defense. That's 71st nationally. And they are 103rd overall in the FBS and 13th in the ACC in total offense allowed. So, it really all starts kind of with the quarterback and what he's able to do. It's almost like, the throwback to the Paul Johnson days at Georgia Tech. It's like running the triple option, but your quarterback's completing 70% of his passes. It's a really diverse, multiple, whatever word you want to use. They can beat you in a lot of different ways on offense, and it starts with Haynes King at quarterback.
Yeah, they're fairly. I mean, they lean on the run a lot, but like you said, Haynes King does complete 70% of his passes, so they have that option. He is leading the team with 89.7 rushing yards per game, followed by Malachi Hosley, 62.5 yards per game, and Jamal Haynes, which is funny because Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, but I digress, 45.4 yards per game. And so I think this is a little bit of a benefit for this Pitt offense this Pitt defense who is just coming off of, as both Isaiah Neal and Francis Brew said, an embarrassing performance against Notre Dame. And I know that's something that they'd like to clean up. It's going to give them a challenge, but they have been pretty strong in stopping the run game. And with the combination of how they've been strong pretty much all season, with the exception of the Notre Dame game and the fact that they're looking for redemption over the Notre Dame game, they're going to be locked in. And I like Pitt's front seven a lot. I think that's a group that is going to be able to maybe not stop everything, but stop enough. And especially when you're looking at the other side, that you're not, when Pitt's offense is on the field, they're not going to have to deal with as, strong of a defense as Pitt is providing. It should give them some wiggle room. Maybe you can't stop all of the touchdowns that Georgia Tech, or all of the plays that Georgia Tech is throwing on you on offense, but Pitt should be able to expose a lot of their weaknesses on defense, because for the most part, this offense has been running fairly smoothly. I know you look at the 5-game run streak and it wasn't the toughest opponents, but this isn't the toughest defense that they're going to play, and probably not close to it either, unfortunately. And so, unfortunately for Georgia Tech. So I think you're going to see it. Both offenses are going to give it all they got, but I see Pitt's offense maybe coming out on top. It's a matter of can Pitt's defense hold Georgia Tech's offense low scoring, despite being one of the top teams in the nation.
Yeah, it's I think when you think when you look at it, I'm really kind of looking at it as who can get one more stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think both offenses are going to kind of click a little bit. When you look at a matchup like this where there are two really big strengths, Pitt's rushing defense versus Georgia Tech's offense in general. I guess you could say the Pitt defense in general, but Georgia Tech rushing offense as well. When you have one side of the ball where there are two strengths kind of matching up against one another, usually it's the other side of the ball that determines it, right? So is Georgia Tech able to kind of dial up some pressure and kind of revert back to what it was maybe earlier in the season, when they beat Colorado with a big time stop, late in the game, like who is going to kind of be a difference maker when Pitt has the ball in that sense? Like, can the offensive line hold up and protect Mason Heintchel enough? Because that was really the biggest issue. I thought everything started and ended with that last week against Notre Dame. And there should be an opportunity for, you hesitate to call it a get-right game, but at least on the offensive side of the ball, there are going to be opportunities for Pitt to make plays and put up points. So that's where my eyes are too. Again, like not really any standouts on the Georgia Tech defense in my mind. And I think the fact that they don't create a ton of pressure really does play into Pitt's favor. And it's really just a matter of, hey, can you keep them to 35 points instead of, 42 or something like that? I think that's really what it's going to come down to. And Abby, with that in mind, let's close out this video with some game picks. Let's start on the football side of things. We'll really quickly touch on Pitt basketball versus UCF at the very end. But it's been a football heavy show, so let's go there. Pitt 2.5 point favorites, 2.5 point underdogs, going down there according to our friends at FanDuel. Where do you kind of fall on that one, Abby? Do you think Pitt wins, and is it that close, or do you think someone breaks outside of that 2.5 point spread?
I am going to take Pitt on this one just because of the defensive, imbalance for Georgia Tech. I think it is going to be that close. I think if Pitt wins, it's going to be like by 3, maybe 2. Who knows? Like, I think it's going to be a close no matter which side you're on, but I am going to take Pitt.
I think I'm going to take Pitt too. I called my shot last week, and it did not come anywhere close to hitting. But I really do think that this matchup does play into Pitt's favor. I think they're going to be pretty PO'd, and I like the way that, on the whole, Pat Narduzzi teams usually bounce back from a bad loss. So I like them in this spot. I think they're going to be juiced up, and I think Georgia Tech is honestly kind of due. I know they took that NC State loss, but they have, again, played with fire a ton, and that defense just looks really leaky. And I think, if the strength of Pitt's defense was its past defense, I would think something different. I think they'd get kind of leaned on. But the fact that it is the rushing offense so strong for Georgia Tech, I'm going to take Pitt in this game. How about that over-under? It's big. It's hefty, 61.5 points. Do you think a lot of scoring in this one?
Oh, I keep going back and forth, but I think, I think there is going to be a lot of scoring because Georgia Tech has such a strong offense. And while Pitt's defense is really solid, I think there are going to get a few touchdowns in there. But I also think Pitt's going to get them right back because of the fact that they're going to have an advantage over Georgia Tech's defense. I've been wrong the past couple of games, but I'm feeling good about 61.5.
I think I am feeling good about it too. 61.5. A lot of points, but I think at least one team gets into the 40s in this one, and that'll do a lot of the heavy lifting there. And then you only need the other side to get 20. I definitely do see this over hitting. I would feel pretty comfortable taking over 61.5. And very quickly, Abby, men's basketball, Pitt playing UCF, actually 1.5 point favorites over UCF. Just give me straight up, who do you think wins the game?
I'm taking Pitt.
I will take Pitt as well. I think that the defense is going to win out over a really strong UCF offense. Appreciate you all tuning in to this video, and thank you for checking into our coverage all week. Another huge game for Pitt down in Atlanta. Big game for men's basketball tonight in Daytona Beach against UCF. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to PG Pitt on YouTube so you do not miss a thing, and follow all of our written work at Post-Gazette.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.